briefly before I get to our panel tonight, Richo and Keith Pitt. An historic day today for sport in Tasmania, with the AFL awarding their 19th licence. Now, Tasmania will join Greater Western Sydney and the Gold Coast Suns as the AFL's expansion teams. Look, I love my AFL. And Tasmania is a proud AFL state, it's produced champions such as Royce Hart, Daryl Baldock, Matthew Richardson and many more. But, and it's a big but for me, why are Australian taxpayers in already dire financial times with a massive budget debt part funding this estimated $700 million stadium with a roof? Now, the roof's important because you put a roof on it, you can't play cricket there. At best, it will be used by the public once a week in winter, catering for a tiny population, many of whom don't want it anyway. And if the AFL, as they have insisted, the only way the state would get a team was a brand new stadium, why didn't the AFL build it? And forget their excuse that it won't be their stadium that didn't stop them buying Marvel Stadium, for example, in Melbourne. And Rugby League's got every right to ask, why not us? Or even the Socceroos, who this week were complaining that they don't even have an Australian training base. Surely it can't have something to do with marginal seats in Tasmania, could it? No, never. Let's bring in my panel to discuss the issues of the day. Former Labor Minister and Labor legend Graham Richardson and Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Graham, first to you. You're a minister in the Labor government. The AFL is going to build this stadium in Tasmania, or Tasmania's going to build it. The AFL, they got funding from the federal government, $250 million in stretched times. Good or bad policy? Would you have given them the dough?
I shouldn't, but I would. It's one of those things where I think the politics will outweigh the economics. And there are 5 seats in Tasmania. They can't be forgotten. And so I think you'll find that not only would they do it, so would the other side, if they were being honest.
Gee, Peter V'landys ought to have his hand out.
Peter V'landys has always got his hand out.
Now, I said at the start of the program today, Richard, it was very strange watching Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. I mean, you know him as well as anybody in his various appearances at the coronation. I think he's got his referendums around the wrong way. Now, look, let's have a look at a bit of what he was up to in London today.
So you will say the oath?
As I have done 10 times when I get sworn into Parliament, yes.
What do you make of the way he's handling himself over there?
Well, look, I think he's doing all right. It's a hard job when you go over there and there are a few issues lingering at home. You can't really cut off the home issues, even though you'd like to. You'd like to leave it all to Richard Marles, but it's just not possible. So Albo's going to have to put up with a bit of, pesky journalists, as they say. But that's just journos doing their job.
Let's talk interest rates. Keith Pitt joins us now. Keith, Jim Chalmers has described the cash rate as a brutal reminder of a slowing economy. They've been in office now for 12 months, come May 22. Isn't it Jim Chalmers' job to actually get the economy to speed up a bit?
Well, firstly, Jim Chalmers is directly responsible. He's the Treasurer. And they have had an absolute windfall from the resources sector. It has been a cracking year for them. They've broken all records. Forecast is about $460 billion. To give you an example, they were around $246 billion in the middle of COVID. No one else can do that. Now, that is a windfall for the government. You have an unemployment rate of 3.5%. That is a massive increase in taxes that are being paid. And we'll be looking very closely to see what it is that Jim Chalmers is going to put that money to. And if it's not savings in the budget, they've already announced they're going to cut a whole heap of infrastructure and everything else. And mate, on the stadium in Tasmania, maybe they could rent some seats in the undercover section overnight and people could sleep in them.
That might be one of the solutions to the homeless problem. You're quite right. Look, we had these budget blowers. We've got this Snowy 2.0 project. We had mining as well as anybody. We had a tunnel boring machine got stuck under a mountain, and now you've got the Snowy project delayed by, we're told today, a further 2 years. And Chris Bowen was forced to come out today and say, oh yeah, they told me last night, so they made it public and I'm pleased they have. This thing's turning into a money pit.
Well, here's the danger, Steve. I said at the time it'd be $10 billion because that was the information I got from people who knew their stuff. You've still got to build the transmission line. You haven't got the Kurri Kurri gas plant anywhere near underway, and Liddell's closed. And as soon as that happened, AEMO were issuing emergency notices on the contingency reserve. There was a shortfall that's going to continue. You can't keep shutting baseload power when the replacement's not built. It doesn't make any sense. And the federal government is directly involved and they can fix it, but they just don't want to.
Well, Keith, my colleague Ross Greenwood had the former CEO of that project on his program this afternoon, and he said that what we now must do is make sure that the Eraring power station doesn't close, and that Liddell was bad enough, and now he's saying we've got to keep that open. Richo, you'd probably agree with him, wouldn't you? We've got to keep that coal baseload power there, otherwise we're going to be in huge trouble, particularly if this thing keeps falling over. I
agree. I would have kept Liddell open. It wouldn't be shut yet if I was having a say in it. I think we've gone crazy on this.
Better make a comeback, Richo.
Mate, at 73, I think a comeback's beyond me. But no, seriously, I don't understand this at all. I don't care who's in power. It seems to me that what your job is to do is to make sure that the light can turn on every time I flick the switch. And for the next 50 years, that means at some point there'll be coal in the system. So we've got to stop thinking about this, no coal future, because it's not going to happen. It's nonsense, and you're just chasing windmills.
That'll be music to Keith's ears. Let's have a listen to that former Snowy 2.0 CEO, the one before the current one, and what he told Ross this afternoon.
Well, we need more gas. What happens is that you can't close Eraring. Let me be absolutely clear, say it as loud as I possibly can. Closing Liddell is bad enough. They are dreaming if they think they can have 80% renewables by 2030.
Keith, when this was launched in 2017, it was expected to be producing power by last year with an overall budget of $2 billion. As you know, that's now blown out to $5 billion. When this was first launched, this project, and it was a pet project of Malcolm's, what did you make of it? I know you were in government at the time.
It's a really complex, especially for the geotech project. Big tunnels through unknown areas. It's a really difficult project to do. And it's pumped hydro, 14-day supply, unless, of course, you don't have a good solid supply from your solar or wind turbines or whatever else it is that's pumping water back up the hill. Mate, I'm still a supporter of things that work when you turn the switch on. I'm with Richo on this. And I don't care if you're burning coal or chook manure or gas. It's got to be things that work. Gas that works, coal that works, nuclear that works, any other fuel that works. The idea that we can run this country on intermittent wind and solar with 28,000 kilometres of transmission that's not yet built, connected all over the place, is an absolute furphy. And every technical piece of training that I've ever received tells me that just won't fly.
Yeah, I love my gas stop, I've got to say that. Richo, the government's talking about forcing perhaps the wealthy to pay more for aged care services. Is that something that's going to fly, do you think?
Well, I think it should fly. There's no reason why the wealthy can't pay a bit more. You've got to have a system that works. It will only work in a country like this if some people are paying a bill. You can't just have everything on the government tick, because it doesn't work. The government's then got to try and pull it out of you in taxes anyway. So you might as well just have the rich give it directly.
Keith, the federal authorities are looking at this idea that too many lobbyists are getting into Parliament House. Hundreds of these passes being given out, one MP apparently ticking off 55 of them, lobbyists all over the joint. You must run into them in the corridor. There's not enough room to walk around Parliament House without running into someone with an orange pass, apparently.
It's hard to get a coffee at Aussies, that's for sure, as Richo would know. Look, this has been the nature of politics for a long period of time. People get employed and engaged to go in and put forward the views of companies and others. From a security viewpoint, my understanding is they all get vetted. Yes, they get supported by an MP. I've signed a couple, and to be honest, I didn't even know that was a secret. But they are people that I know and have known for a long period of time, and it's certainly not 70. But you've got to get expertise in the building. That's one of the ways to get it, because, mate, we don't all know everything about everything, regardless of what some of the public might think of a few of us. We do need to take advice from people that know what they're doing, and not always from the bureaucrats. The public service sometimes has their own agenda. My view for them, and I said this to them all the time, frank and fearless advice is what I want to hear from you, and then we make a decision.
Well, Richo doesn't need a pass. He's got a lifetime pass. Keith and Graham, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, as usual.